who makes that decision.
Can I say something? Because I feel like Mark's sort of being hammered here. I went to the FDA with a company that wanted to try an immunomodulator. And they sent their protocol forward, and we got there, and there were 20 FDA people that were in the room that had read the grant, read it better than I'd read it, knew every little detail about it. There were 5 statisticians, there were 4 immunologists, there's just an extraordinary group of people, and they told this company, you could do it the way you wrote it, but you know what? You might not get approved that way, or you might, but you might not. And if you were to include this, this, or this, it would be a stronger protocol. And are you sure you want a phase 3 when you really haven't done the phase 2 yet? And they were very gracious in pointing out the obvious, but it was a great process. And it was a pre-review. It wasn't, the clock wasn't ticking, you know, it was a great process. And then this company went back to the drawing board. And so I thought it was a great experience. So I'm feeling kind of bad that Mark's getting hammered, because I think the process is an extraordinary process. I've had 4 physician INDs for various things over the years, and always the review process was incredibly informative and very quick, within 30 days. And I still remember speaking to some reviewer that was snowed in and in her home, talking to me on the phone for 2 hours to go over this protocol that I had submitted that was a physician IND, which meant, you know, someone that's not a wizard of FDA process had put in an IND, and she walked me through it, and I tightened up the grant and the protocol, and put it into play. So I think they've been great. And I think part of the issue and some of this frustration has been that there's only been one drug that's ever tried to go through. So we're holding up this one drug as an example of FDA process. Mark's not even allowed to talk about FDA process when it's about the drug. You know, what we need is the research clinical trials networks. I'm sorry, we need this stuff. We don't even know whether or not our standards of care, the medicines I use to help my patients fall asleep at night, work effectively in these patients. We haven't even done the simple stuff yet, let alone take some innovative new drug off the shelf and try to take it from start to finish. I mean, take generics and put them into clinical trial. I mean, my patients can't afford expensive drugs anyway. So I mean, we have a lot of work to do, but it's on us as the investigators and on the agencies to help us develop the infrastructure and clinical trials networks so we can do this work. And then we'll dump it on poor Mark when our stuff doesn't run through the FDA in a very, very expeditious fashion. Though I bet my bet is on the FDA being expeditious. I mean, I was really, they have these 30-day timelines and they stick to them. They're like, okay, now you got 30 days, our clock's up. We got 30 days, and it goes through. It just zip, zip, zip.
And your point about them being approachable on the front end, I mean, again, there's been a lot of anecdote related these last 3 days, and that has been related to me many times in many circumstances, not just drug approval, but other, you know, devices and what have you, that FDA folks, they are some of the finest scientists in the world, and they just, you know, their job is the safety and efficacy threshold. We need to move on if you want to speak for something else for 20 minutes.
Yeah, but we only have a little time left.
I did ask a question to you, Mark. I was wondering if you could answer it.
Could you rephrase specifically what your question is, and I'll try to answer it the best I can.
It was just whether the reviewers are available publicly. At NIH and other places, they publicly tell who the reviewers are. I was wondering within the FDA whether that's public record.
I think, okay, for approved products now, when a product is approved, information on the reviewers is provided. When a product is taken to an advisory committee, it is usually the reviewers who present their findings to the advisory committee. The briefing package that is submitted, that is sent to the members of the advisory committee and is made publicly available on the advisors and committee's website, will usually identify the speakers and the authors of these reviews. Again, I think when we're dealing with a product that has not yet received approval, that has received only a complete response, I do not believe that it is a current policy to identify the reviewers and make these reviewers available.
I don't think, as I recall the regulations, it's not, because that's all pre-decisional, and it's meant to protect the integrity
of the review
proprietary
process.
data from the company as well as the review process.
Exactly.
So when it reaches daylight, that's when whoever is on that advisory committee, that's when their names would then
Yes.
be also in the daylight.
Now, however, the sponsors and the companies, of the applicant, of the sponsors, certainly know who the reviewers are. They meet with them face to face. When they request meetings, they request that certain individuals with expertise be present at those meetings. And and again, as Nancy was talking about, at these meetings, the necessary experts will be made available and will discuss and provide their information to the companies. The FDA is the repository of lots of information about failed drug development, and therefore we are able to use that type of information in guiding investigators as to understanding what could possibly go wrong and how this could possibly affect their development process. This is one of the things that we do provide when we do discuss openly. So at that level, certainly sponsors and applicants are not dealing with anonymous reviewers. They're dealing with people that they have the opportunity to meet with, discuss, ask questions, receive responses all along the development of the process. The pathway.
I just wanted to clarify, you brought up the issue with NIH, and if you want to have an analogous situation, if a grant has been reviewed or a grant has been tabled and a decision made not to review, you don't know who those grants are or what they are. You never know anything about anything unless the person whose research was rejected wants to let you know why and what the pink sheets were and everything. So it's really no different from what happens in NIH and in FDA.
It seems to me there are valuable lessons to be learned from this whole process. As Nancy's pointed out, this is the only drug that's ever put up. It might be appropriate for us at the next meeting to invite hemispherics and ask them.
That's not representative.
Yeah, but it's their that they probably would not be able to answer scientific questions. Let's bring the scientific officer here. We can ask them what they did, what went well, what didn't go well, why it's not approved, and then we can decide, where the errors lie and maybe shine some light on what not to do next time around when we get the next drug come on.
And none of these rules and regulations say strictly, this only applies to CFSAC. It's, it is FDA's regulatory authority and NIH's grant making and everything else, so.
Yeah. In the viral hepatitis field, hepatitis C, we know what the FDA wants to see to get a drug approved. Safety, obviously, but also a disappearance of viral load in the long term, which includes a follow-up after treating patients. So that's all being very well defined. And Mark at the beginning mentioned etiology, and I think what he was referring to is it would be nice to have an etiologic agent obviously associated with chronic fatigue that we can monitor during a clinical trial and show its reduction and, if not, its disappearance. But I think the discussion has been very helpful. I think it will be really helpful to our field of ME/CFS, especially as we're expanding our research, hopefully, and our clinical work with the clinical centers. It would be very helpful from the FDA to get some guidelines on what they really want to see from clinical trials. If there's an etiologic agent involved, I'm sure you can recommend guidelines on how trials are conducted, what the endpoints would be in terms of efficacy, and some general guidelines on safety. But if there's not an etiologic agent that the drug is targeting, if it's an immunotherapeutic, for example, it would be very helpful to know from the FDA what it is you want the investigators to monitor and what kind of degree of effect you're after. I mean, that would be very helpful to us at this point in the field, I think, to get some input.
I think with respect to chronic fatigue syndrome, which is, as we still understand, is a multi-systemic disease, depending on what your product is and what aspect of the disease you expect to influence, you will have dialogue with the agency as to how you intend to show that your product affects what it affects and provides benefit in the way that it provides benefit. And as you go along and develop your ideas, we will talk with you and provide guidance as you go through phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 is a very important time to help pick the right dose to go to phase 3. It's also the time to look at the endpoints that you're trying to measure, what markers or whatever. You learn a lot about feasibility. You learn certain ideas about treatment effects, so that you can help design your phase 3 study with the appropriate sample size, so you can show the treatment effect on the aspect of the disease that you want to influence. I think with chronic fatigue syndrome right now, we'll certainly be dealing with different products that have different approaches based on what aspect of the disease that product is going to influence. And we will always have discussion with the companies at every step along the way to show it with them and provide them advice as to how they want to show that their product has the effect that they intend to have.
Yes, but I think it really would be helpful to have a dialogue between the FDA and this group, because at this meeting alone, we've heard about new quantifiable biomarkers associated with the disease. We've learned about quantifiable exercise criteria that can be used. And so I really do think it would be really valuable to the field if we had a discussion of some, an open discussion of this kind of trial design with the FDA. There's a lot of new information was presented at this meeting that I think would be very useful in trial design, and it would be great, very important to do that with the FDA.
Well, we do hope that a lot of the information that we've heard these past few days will lead to more research and more innovation and design and development programs that companies will be interested in coming forward and presenting that to us. We're not going to design that for them, but if they have, based on the information they have accumulated, that they have certain ideas how they can possibly benefit chronic fatigue syndrome, that they can come and describe these ideas and their approaches to us, and we can help them then design, we can help them, provide them advice on their development plan, how they want to go into first in humans, for example, how they want to how they're going to use their information from phase 1 to go to phase 2. It's going to be, at this point, it's really going to be, every step along the way is going to be built as we get more and more information. Unfortunately, we don't have any example of a successful drug development that we can use as a basis to guide other drug developments. This is how we did it for AIDS. We started with antiviral products. We started using different types of endpoints. We approved DDI based on an effect on CD4 counts, and that was confirmed with clinical benefit. That led to the Subpart H regulations and the concept that a product could be approved based on surrogate markers. But that came along with the science. We could not design in advance how those studies should be designed. But there was lots of dialogue at the time there too, with companies that were interested in developing products that had that had done some work or proof of concept to show that their product had an effect on a certain aspect of the disease. And we'll continue to work with companies that do have investigative new drug applications that they would like to submit to us to start their first in human studies. Unlike hepatitis C, we don't have a specific agent and markers that we can speak about at this point. I'm still hopeful that the science will change, but the FDA will not be doing this science. We'll be able to respond to the science and to the development of the science and provide the best advice along the way when people have enough science to come to us.
We're rapidly losing the quorum, so I'll take Dane's question and then
just as a point of
accept the
information,
motion.
the FM drug trials weren't based on any biomarker. They were based on what are called, and I don't want to get this wrong, minimal clinically important differences. And so there is a base to go from in terms of testing any efficacious treatment in CFS, and is to use the patient outcomes, not just the biological markers. So there has been precedent in terms of...
Oh, certainly patient-reported outcomes is something to be discussed, and it is on the table there.
I mean, those FM drugs were based solely on those.
Well, so is the Ampligen trial. There's no biomarker.
That's
It's
approved.
how that is described.
Those are FDA-approved drugs that were based on FI.
It's how it's described
it's-
and how
it's the
robust
endpoints
it
that you
holds
pick.
up. Exactly.
Chris, can I just make a quick, I know we're running out of